Amir had not seen his hometown for more than 15 years. Life had taken him far away, into the noisy streets of the city where tall buildings blocked the sky and people hurried as if every second was a race. In the city, Amir had worked small jobs, carried heavy loads, served in restaurants, and later repaired machines in a small workshop. He had built a modest life for himself, one that was enough to survive but never enough to bring him peace. The city gave him food and money, but it never gave him comfort. In the quiet hours of the night, when the traffic finally faded, Amir often thought about his father's land in the countryside. He remembered how wide and free it felt, fields stretching like a soft green carpet, the oak tree standing tall near the small house, and the sound of birds that woke him up each morning. That land was not only earth and grass, it carried the memories of his childhood and the legacy of his family. Then one morning, a letter arrived. The envelope was old, the handwriting shaky. It was from Uncle Rafiq, a longtime friend of Amir's father. The words inside were short but carried weight. Amir, your land is not as you left it. You must come back before it is too late. Amir read the lines again and again. What did it mean? What had happened to the land? Why did Uncle Rafiq sound worried? The questions burned in Amir's mind until he could no longer ignore them. He packed a small bag, closed the workshop early, and bought a ticket back to his village. The journey was long. The bus moved past busy towns, then smaller villages, and finally the open countryside. Amir watched the fields pass by through the dusty window. His heart was restless, a mixture of fear and hope. Would he see the land just as he remembered it, calm and untouched? Or would he find something he did not expect? When the bus finally stopped near his old village, Amir stepped down and felt the air change. It was cooler, cleaner, filled with the smell of soil after rain. For a moment, his heart softened. He was home. He walked down the familiar road that led to his family's land, every step filled with memory. He could almost hear his father's voice saying, "This land will always be yours, Amir. Protect it." But as Amir came closer, something felt different. The road was wider than before, with gravel spread neatly on the ground. The old wooden fence was gone. And then his eyes froze. Where the open fields once stretched, there now stood rows of wooden cabins. 20 of them, standing in neat lines like soldiers. They looked newly built, with fresh paint and shiny windows. Smoke rose from chimneys, cars were parked outside, and strangers moved about as if they belonged there. Children played with balls on the same soil where Amir's father had once planted wheat. Laughter filled the air, but it pierced Amir's heart. He stood there, unable to move. Was this really his land? The land his father had worked on with bare hands? How could so much change without him knowing? Amir slowly walked further, his steps heavy. He passed one cabin and heard the sound of music inside. He saw another family sitting outside, cooking on a grill. They smiled at each other, completely unaware of him. Every scene felt unreal, as if he had stepped into a dream that did not belong to him. Then his eyes caught a large signboard at the entrance of the cabins. In bold letters, it read, "Sunrise Cabin Community, managed by the Homeowners Association, HOA." Amir's chest tightened. Community. HOA. On my land? He stood staring at the sign when a man in a polo shirt and dark sunglasses walked toward him. The man looked official, as if he belonged to some management team. "Excuse me, sir," the man said in a polite but firm tone. "Can I help you? Are you lost?" Amir shook his head slowly. "This is my land," he said, his voice steady though his heart raced. The man gave a short laugh. "No, sir. This is private property. This entire community is managed by our HOA. Maybe you should check your facts before making claims." Amir's jaw tightened. He wanted to shout, to tell the man the truth, but he stayed calm. "I know what I'm saying," he replied. "This land was my father's, and now it belongs to me. I have the documents. I have the receipts." The man's confident smile faded a little, but he quickly adjusted it. "Well, sir, if you really believe that, you can take it up with the HOA board. But I warn you, they don't take kindly to false claims." Amir didn't answer. He turned and walked away, but his heart was heavy with fire. He knew what he had to do. Inside his old leather bag, wrapped in a folder, were the original documents, his father's will, the property papers, and every tax receipt carefully kept. The papers carried proof, the kind no one could erase. As Amir looked back at the cabins, his father's voice echoed in his mind once more, "Never let go of what is rightfully yours." And Amir promised himself he wouldn't. The night Amir returned to the village, he could not sleep. He stayed at a small guest house near the market, lying awake on the wooden bed while the ceiling fan spun slowly above him. His mind refused to rest. The sight of the cabins haunted him. He kept hearing the laughter of children and the voice of that man in the polo shirt telling him he was on private property. Amir's heart was torn. He had left this place years ago, thinking his father's land would wait for him as it always had. But now, strangers lived on it, strangers who acted like owners. He turned on his side, closed his eyes, and whispered to himself, "It is mine. I must prove it." The next morning, Amir rose early. He carried his old leather bag close to his chest, the same bag that held his father's will and property documents. Each page was like a piece of his family's history. He walked back toward the land, determined to understand exactly what had happened. As the sun rose higher, the cabins came into full view again. From a distance, they looked neat and welcoming, with smoke rising gently from chimneys and fresh laundry hanging outside. Families were waking up, children ran out barefoot, and someone's dog barked happily. To any outsider, it looked like a peaceful community. But to Amir, it felt like a wound. He walked closer, observing every detail. The cabins were numbered from 1 to 20, each with a small porch. The ground where his father once planted wheat was now divided into driveways and flower beds. Even the oak tree, his favorite childhood spot, was surrounded by a wooden bench where strangers sat drinking tea. As Amir stood there silently, a woman came out of one of the cabins. She looked at him curiously. "Good morning," she said politely. Amir nodded but did not answer. He did not want to start a conversation yet. His eyes shifted back to the big signboard at the entrance. He read the words again slowly: Sunrise Cabin Community, managed by the Homeowners Association, HOA. It felt unreal. How could an entire association exist on land that was never theirs? While Amir stood there, a small group of people gathered near the office building at the far end. It was modern, with glass doors and a neat logo on top. A few men and women entered, carrying files and talking seriously. Amir guessed they were part of the HOA board. His chest tightened. He wanted answers. Just then, the same man from yesterday appeared again, the one with sunglasses and a stiff smile. He recognized Amir instantly and frowned. "You again," he said in a sharp tone. "I told you yesterday, this is not your land. What are you doing here?" Amir took a deep breath. I came to see. I came to understand what you have done. The man folded his arms. What we have done is build a community. Families live here. They paid for these cabins. They have rights. You cannot just walk around making claims with no proof. Amir's hand gripped his leather bag. I have proof, he said quietly but firmly. The man narrowed his eyes. Then show it to the board. But I warn you, our lawyers are strong, and we don't waste time with outsiders. Amir said nothing more. He walked past the man, his steps heavy but steady. He needed to see the office, to face the people who had dared to steal his land. Inside the office, the air smelled of fresh paint and polished wood. A receptionist looked up from her desk. Can I help you, sir? She asked politely. Amir placed his bag on the counter. I need to meet your board. I need to show them something important. The receptionist hesitated. Do you have an appointment? No, Amir replied. But they will want to see this. He tapped the bag softly. She studied him for a moment, then sighed. Wait here. Minutes later, Amir was led into a meeting room where 4 board members sat around a long table. They looked professional, dressed neatly, their faces calm but sharp. At the head of the table sat a woman in her 50s, her hair tied back, her glasses resting low on her nose. Good morning, she said in a measured voice. I am Mrs. Collins, head of the HOA board. Who are you, and what brings you here? Amir walked slowly to the table, opened his bag, and placed a stack of old papers in front of them. My name is Amir. This land was my father's. After his passing, it became mine. You had no right to build cabins here. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Mrs. Collins picked up the papers, flipping through them with a faint smile. Sir, this land was abandoned for many years. We developed it into something useful. We gave people homes. Families have invested here. Your claims are inconvenient. Inconvenient. Amir's voice shook slightly, but he stood tall. This is not about convenience. This is about truth. And the truth is written here. He tapped the documents firmly. For the first time, the confident expressions on the board members' faces weakened. They looked at one another, uncertain. Mrs. Collins closed the folder and set it down. Her smile remained, but it was thinner now. Well, she said, leaning back in her chair, if you truly believe this, then you may take us to court. Until then, these cabins belong to us. Amir felt the fire in his chest grow stronger. He knew now that this was no simple mistake. The HOA had taken his land deliberately, thinking he would never return. But they were wrong. As he picked up his papers and walked out of the office, one thought burned in his mind: this battle has only begun. Amir walked out of the HOA office with his papers clutched tightly in his hand. The morning sun was bright, but his heart felt heavy. He had expected denial, but the boldness of the board shocked him. They had admitted that they built the cabins on land they did not buy, yet they spoke as if they were untouchable. Their confidence came not from truth, but from power. Amir returned to the guest house and spread his documents on the small wooden table. His father's will, the original property deed, and the old tax receipts were all there. He ran his fingers over the yellowed pages, remembering how carefully his father had kept them safe. These papers carried his family's name, his father's signature, and the stamp of the local registrar. They were not weak pieces of paper, they were proof. Still, Amir knew the battle ahead would not be simple. The HOA had money, influence, and lawyers. They had built 20 cabins and filled them with families. To them, Amir was just one man who had been away too long. They thought his voice would be too small to fight theirs. But Amir was not alone. That evening, he went to visit Uncle Rafiq, the man who had written the letter. Rafiq's house was small but warm, filled with the smell of fresh bread. The old man welcomed him with open arms. "Amir, my boy," Rafiq said with emotion in his voice. "I was waiting for you. I knew you would come back." Amir sat down and poured out everything: the cabins, the board members, the arrogance of Mrs. Collins, and the documents he carried. Rafiq listened quietly, nodding with concern. "I told you in the letter," Rafiq said finally. "They thought you would never return. They took your silence as permission. But I am glad you are here now. You must not let them steal what is yours." "But how can I fight them?" Amir asked. "They have built a whole community. Families are living there. If I try to reclaim it, I will be seen as the enemy." Rafiq's eyes softened. "The families are innocent. They were fooled by the HOA. Your fight is not against them, it is against those who took the land without asking, without paying, without respect. And you have something they cannot defeat: the truth." Encouraged by Rafiq's words, Amir agreed to take the next step. The old man introduced him to a lawyer named Kamal, a calm and sharp-minded man from the nearby town. Kamal studied Amir's documents carefully. After a long pause, he looked up and said, "These papers are strong. Legally, the land is yours. The HOA never purchased it. Their cabins stand on stolen soil. We can fight this." Hearing this, Amir felt a wave of hope. For the first time since his return, he saw a path forward. The next day, Amir returned to the cabins not as a silent observer, but as a rightful owner demanding respect. He walked straight to the community office, where several board members were gathered. They looked surprised to see him again. "You again," one of them said with annoyance. "Didn't Mrs. Collins explain yesterday? You have no place here." Amir placed his folder on the table with calm strength. "I am not here to argue. I am here to tell you the truth. This land was never yours. It belongs to me. My documents are older and stronger than any claim you make. You built cabins on stolen property, and you thought no one would notice. But I noticed. And I have returned." The room went silent. Some of the board members shifted uncomfortably. Others tried to look confident, but Amir saw fear in their eyes. Finally, Mrs. Collins spoke. Her voice was firm, but her smile was strained. "Sir, this is a serious accusation. Do you realize how much money has been invested here? Do you realize how many families live in these cabins? We have created a community, and you are trying to destroy it with old pieces of paper." Amir leaned forward, his eyes steady. "Those old pieces of paper are the law. They are history. They are proof. You created nothing but a lie. And you cannot erase my father's name with your signboards." The tension in the room grew heavy. Some board members whispered to one another, clearly unsure of what to do. Mrs. Collins, however, kept her composure. She adjusted her glasses and said coldly, "If you believe your claim is true, then you may take us to court. But know this: we will not give up easily. We have lawyers, money, and influence. You are one man. Think carefully before you challenge us." Amir stood tall, his voice steady. "One man with the truth is stronger than 100 with lies. If it must be court, then court it will be." I will not walk away. He gathered his documents and walked out of the office. Behind him, the board members whispered nervously, their confidence cracked for the first time. As Amir stepped back into the open air, he felt the wind brush his face. The battle ahead would be long and difficult, but he no longer felt alone. His father's words echoed in his heart, "Never let go of what is rightfully yours." Amir whispered back, "I won't, Baba. I promise." Amir's confrontation with the HOA board left him both angry and determined. For years, he had lived far away from this land, believing it would remain untouched. But now he understood the truth, they had taken advantage of his absence. They thought his silence meant weakness. They thought the soil of his father's hard work could be turned into profit without resistance. That evening, Amir sat with his lawyer, Kamal, and Uncle Rafiq. The papers lay open on the table once again. Kamal spoke firmly, his voice steady like someone who had seen many battles in court. "Amir, they will not accept their mistake easily. They know they are wrong, but they are hiding behind money and the families living in those cabins. They will try to make you look like the villain. But your documents are strong. We will challenge them legally." Amir nodded slowly. He knew Kamal was right. "I don't want to hurt the families," he said softly. "They are innocent. They were fooled by the HOA. But I also cannot let go of my father's land." Uncle Rafiq placed a comforting hand on Amir's shoulder. "You are not taking away their homes. You are taking away the lies. If they wish to stay, they can stay, but under your rightful ownership. The real enemy here is not the families. It is the greedy people sitting in that boardroom." The next few days were not easy. Word spread quickly in the community. Some families heard rumors that a man had come claiming the land was his. People whispered about him when he walked near the cabins. Some were curious, others were afraid, and a few were openly angry. One afternoon, a middle-aged man approached Amir near the oak tree. His voice was sharp. "Why are you doing this? My family bought this cabin with our savings. We were told everything was legal. Now you say the land belongs to you. What will happen to us if you win?" Amir looked at the man with calm eyes. "I do not blame you. You trusted them. But the truth cannot be ignored. I am not here to destroy your home. I am here to take back what belongs to my family. If you wish to stay, we will find a way. But the HOA must answer for their lies." The man stared at Amir for a long moment before walking away silently. His anger was mixed with confusion, but Amir knew the seed of truth had been planted. Meanwhile, the HOA began their resistance. Letters started arriving at Amir's guest house. The first one accused him of making false claims. The second one suggested his documents were fake. The third one threatened legal action against him for harassing their community. Each letter carried the HOA's bold logo, as if the weight of their name could silence him. But Amir did not bend. He kept every letter carefully, showing them to Kamal. The lawyer only shook his head. "This is their fear speaking. They want to scare you. But remember, the law is on your side." Amir also began visiting the town registrar's office. With Kamal's help, he requested copies of official records, land ownership files, maps, and tax histories. Each record confirmed the same truth: the land was never sold, never transferred. It was still under his family's name. The HOA had built without permission, without purchase, and without respect for the law. One evening, as Amir returned from the registrar's office, he stopped by the cabins again. He watched children play in the open space, their laughter filling the air. He remembered playing in that same spot when he was a child, running through the fields while his father worked nearby. Now those fields were covered in cabins and cars, but the land's spirit was still alive. Standing there, Amir felt both sadness and strength. Sadness because so much had changed without him, and strength because he knew he carried the truth of generations in his hands. The HOA board, however, grew more aggressive. They held community meetings where they painted Amir as a dangerous outsider. Mrs. Collins stood before the families and declared, "Do not believe his lies. We gave you homes, and we will protect you. He wants to take everything away." Her words filled the families with fear, and some began to see Amir as a threat. A few even shouted at him when he passed by. "Go back to the city," one man yelled. "We don't need you here." Amir felt the sting of their words, but he did not lose heart. He knew they were speaking out of fear, not truth. He also knew time was on his side. The law would not ignore the documents. At night, he often sat under the oak tree with Uncle Rafiq. The stars spread across the sky, the same stars his father once pointed out to him when he was a boy. "You know," Amir whispered one evening, "sometimes I feel tired. Their voices are loud, and mine feels small." Rafiq smiled gently. "The truth does not need to be loud, Amir. It only needs to stand. And it is standing with you." Amir closed his eyes, letting the night breeze cool his face. The road ahead was long, and the resistance of the HOA was growing stronger. But so was his determination. This was not only about land anymore. It was about respect, memory, and justice. And Amir promised himself once again he would not give up. The decision was made. Amir and his lawyer Kamal filed the case in court. It was no longer about words or warnings, it was now a legal battle. For Amir, the weight of this moment was heavy. He had never been inside a courtroom before, but he carried the courage of his father's memory and the strength of truth. The first hearing was set on a bright Monday morning. Amir woke early, dressed in simple clothes, and carried his leather bag with the documents inside. As he walked toward the courthouse with Kamal, his steps were slow but steady. He kept reminding himself, "This is not only my fight. This is my father's fight too." When they reached the courthouse, Amir was surprised to see the crowd. The HOA had come prepared. Their lawyers stood tall in dark suits, holding thick files. Behind them sat Mrs. Collins and two other board members, whispering with confidence. They looked at Amir as if he were nothing more than a troublemaker wasting their time. Amir sat quietly beside Kamal. His hands trembled slightly, but his eyes did not waver. When the judge entered, the room became silent. The case was called, and the battle began. The HOA's lawyer spoke first. His voice was smooth and commanding. "Your Honor, this man claims ownership of land that was long abandoned. The HOA stepped in to develop the area, to bring life and community. Families invested their savings here. We have built something meaningful. To tear this down because of an old claim would be unfair to everyone involved." Amir clenched his fists but stayed silent. Kamal gave him a small nod, reminding him to be patient. Then Kamal stood. His voice was calm, but each word carried weight. "Your Honor, this case is not about community or investment. It is about the law. My client, Amir, is the rightful heir of this land. We have original deeds, tax receipts, and a will signed by his late father. The HOA never purchased this land, never requested permission, and never gained legal rights. They built cabins on property that does not belong to them. That is the truth." The judge leaned forward, listening carefully. Amir watched as the papers were handed to the court. He saw the familiar handwriting of his father on the will, the government stamp on the deed, the careful records of tax payments year after year. They were more than papers, they were voices from the past, speaking on his behalf. The HOA's lawyer tried to interrupt. These documents are old. They may not even be valid anymore. Kamal replied firmly, old does not mean invalid. The law does not erase ownership because of age. Unless the land was sold, transferred, or seized legally, the rightful ownership remains. And here, there is no record of any transfer. None. A quiet murmur spread through the courtroom. Even some of the families living in the cabins had come to watch. They shifted in their seats, whispering to one another. For the first time, doubt entered their eyes. The judge ordered the registrar's office to send official records for confirmation. The next hearing would be set after reviewing those records. The session ended, but Amir could feel the air had shifted slightly. Outside the courthouse, Mrs. Collins walked past Amir with a forced smile. "Don't get too comfortable," she said coldly. "This is only the beginning. You cannot win against us." Amir met her gaze calmly. "I don't need to win against you. I only need to stand with the truth." Her smile faded as she walked away, her heels clicking angrily against the floor. Over the next weeks, the battle grew more intense. The HOA began spreading rumors about Amir in the community. They told families that he wanted to throw them out, that he would destroy the cabins, that he was a selfish man who cared only about money. Some families began looking at Amir with fear and anger again. Children were told not to play near him. But Amir did not let bitterness enter his heart. He visited the registrar's office again with Kamal. When the official records finally arrived, they showed exactly what he had always known: the land was never transferred. The name on the documents was still his father's, and through the will, it was his. The day of the second hearing, Amir stood taller than before. This time, Kamal presented not only the old documents but also the fresh copies from the registrar's office. The judge examined them carefully, his eyes narrowing as he read. "These records are clear," the judge said slowly. "Ownership remains with Amir. The HOA has no legal deed of purchase." The HOA's lawyers tried to argue again, talking about investments, families, and development. But Amir could see the change. The confidence that once filled their voices was beginning to crack. The weight of truth was pressing down on them. When the session ended, Amir walked out of the courthouse with Kamal and Uncle Rafiq. The sun was warm on his face, and for the first time since his return, he felt lighter. The battle was far from over, but the foundation of victory had been laid. That night, Amir sat under the oak tree once more. The cabin stood behind him, glowing with evening lights. Children laughed in the distance, families cooked their dinners, and life continued as if nothing had changed. But Amir knew everything had changed. The law had heard his voice. The soil had remembered its owner. And the battle had truly begun. The case was moving forward. Each hearing brought new tension, new arguments, and new eyes watching from the cabins. For the families living there, the courtroom battle was not just a story anymore, it was their future. Some still believed the HOA's promises, but others were beginning to wonder if Amir's words carried more truth than they had first imagined. Amir felt the pressure growing. He carried not only the burden of his father's legacy but also the weight of those families' fears. At night, he lay awake thinking, what if they are forced to leave? What if children lose their homes? His heart did not want to see anyone suffer. Yet he also knew the deeper suffering would be his father's memory, erased if he surrendered. One morning, Kamal arrived at the guest house with important news. He held a folder in his hand, his eyes sharp with determination. "Amir," he said, placing the folder on the table, "we found something." Amir leaned forward, anxious. Kamal opened the folder and revealed testimonies, statements from workers who had been hired during the construction of the cabins. "They told us everything," Kamal explained. "The HOA never bought the land. They never even tried. They told the workers to ignore questions of ownership. They said, no one will return. Build quickly. Fill the cabins. Once families move in, it will be too late." Amir felt his chest tighten. The truth was worse than he thought. It wasn't carelessness, it was a plan. The HOA had built on his land deliberately, counting on his silence. "We also have neighbors ready to testify," Kamal continued. "They knew the land belonged to your father. They remember him working the fields. They remember you as a boy. They will speak in court." Hope flickered inside Amir's heart. For the first time, he felt that the weight of lies was beginning to lift. The next hearing was unlike the others. The courtroom was packed with families from the cabins. Some came out of fear, others out of curiosity, and a few out of guilt for not believing Amir earlier. The HOA board sat in their usual seats, their faces stiff, but their confidence was thinner now. Kamal called the first witness, a man who had worked as a carpenter during the cabin construction. He stepped forward nervously but spoke clearly. "I was hired to build these cabins. I asked about the land once, because I knew it was old farmland. But they told me not to worry. They said no owner would return. They told us to work fast and not ask questions." Gasps filled the room. Families exchanged uneasy glances. The second witness was an elderly woman from the neighboring village. She spoke slowly, her voice carrying years of memory. "I watched Amir's father work on that land. I saw Amir as a child playing under the oak tree. Everyone here knew the land was his family's. When the cabins appeared, we were surprised, but we thought maybe the family had given permission. Now I see they did not." Her words struck the courtroom like a bell of truth. Even the judge leaned forward with interest. The HOA's lawyers tried to challenge the witnesses, asking tricky questions, trying to twist their words. But each answer remained firm. Piece by piece, the wall of lies began to crack. Finally, Kamal presented the official records again. "Your Honor," he said, his voice strong, "not only do we have original deeds, tax receipts, and the will, but we also have the registrar's confirmation. The land never changed hands. It belongs to Amir. The HOA knew this. They built without right, without permission, and without respect for the law." The judge's eyes narrowed as he looked at the board members. For the first time, silence fell heavy on their side of the room. Mrs. Collins adjusted her glasses, but her usual confident smile was gone. Amir sat still, his heart pounding. He remembered his father's words, "The land will always call you back, my son." And indeed, it had. Outside the courthouse after the hearing, families gathered around Amir. Some still looked nervous, but many now spoke kindly. One woman said softly, "We didn't know. We were told everything was legal. If what you say is true, then we stand with you." A man added, "We trusted the HOA, but now we see they lied. We only want security for our families. If you can give us that, we will support you." Amir felt tears press against his eyes, though he held them back. "I am not here to destroy your homes," he said gently. I am here to destroy the lie. If you wish to stay, we will find a way. But the truth must win first. That night, Amir returned to the oak tree. The cabins glowed with warm lights, and the sound of children playing reached his ears. He sat on the wooden bench that now circled the tree and looked up at the stars. He thought about his father, about the years he had been gone, about the silence that allowed this injustice to grow. But now the silence was broken. The truth had stepped forward. The battle was not finished, but the heart of it was clear. The HOA had been exposed. Their lies were uncovered, their false power shaken. And Amir knew the land was listening, waiting for justice to be done. The final court hearing arrived, and Amir felt a mixture of nervousness and calm determination. After months of struggle, presentations, and witnesses, the moment of truth had come. The courtroom was packed. Families from the cabins had come to see what would happen, neighbors were curious, and the HOA board members sat stiffly in their seats, their confident expressions now replaced by tension. The judge reviewed the documents once again, the original deeds, the tax receipts, the will, and the testimonies of witnesses who had confirmed the truth. Every paper, every statement, every record spoke in Amir's favor. Mrs. Collins and the board tried one last time to argue. Your Honor, we invested time and money. Families live there. To take this land away now would be unfair. Please consider the consequences. The judge leaned forward, his eyes steady and firm. Investments do not erase ownership. Development does not replace the law. The land belongs to Amir. The HOA knowingly built on property they did not own. Their actions were deliberate and unlawful. Therefore, ownership is returned to Amir immediately, and the HOA must vacate the property. A silence fell over the courtroom. Gasps, whispers, and stunned faces filled the room. The families looked at each other, some in shock, some unsure of what to do next. Mrs. Collins' face paled, and she struggled to find words. For the first time, the board's carefully maintained confidence had completely disappeared. Amir felt his chest tighten. Relief, joy, and sadness mixed together in a strange and powerful way. He had fought for justice, and justice had returned to him. Yet, he remembered the families, the innocent ones who had no idea that the land they lived on was taken unlawfully. He could not forget them. After the verdict, Amir requested a private meeting with the families. He stood at the edge of the property, the familiar fields now marked by cabins and driveways, and spoke to them honestly. I know this has been confusing and frightening, he began gently. The land belongs to my family, and it was taken without our permission. But I do not want to hurt anyone who lived here in good faith. If you wish to stay, you may rent or buy the cabins legally from me. This way, everything is fair and honest. The families exchanged glances, their fear slowly fading. One man stepped forward, nodding. We didn't know. We trusted the HOA. But if you are fair, we will follow your rules. Another woman added, we just want our children to have a safe home. If that is possible, we will respect your rights. Amir smiled for the first time in weeks, the tension of worry leaving his shoulders. He knew that while ownership was important, fairness and kindness were just as vital. The HOA board, meanwhile, was forced to leave. They packed their papers, their pride shattered, and walked away in silence. The cabins they had built with greed and deception were now under Amir's legal ownership, and the families were safe under his care. That evening, Amir stood under the oak tree, looking out over the land. The warm light of the cabins glowed softly in the distance, children's laughter floated in the air, and the sky turned golden with the setting sun. He remembered playing here as a boy, watching his father work, and hearing stories about how every seed planted carried hope. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Baba, it is done. The land is ours again. The truth has won." A gentle breeze brushed against his face, as if answering him, carrying a sense of peace. Amir felt his father's presence in the rustling leaves, in the soil beneath his feet, and in the very air around him. The fight had been long, the resistance fierce, but justice had returned home. Amir walked slowly along the edge of the property, touching the fences, the cabin porches, and even the trees. Everything had changed, yet something timeless remained: the spirit of the land, the memory of his family, and the strength of truth. Over the next few weeks, Amir worked to organize the cabins for the families. Some chose to stay, paying fair rent, others decided to move on, finding new homes with the assurance that the process had been honest. The land began to feel alive again, not because of money or structures, but because of fairness, respect, and trust. Amir also spent time planting flowers and small trees along the boundaries, honoring his father's memory and the hard work that had gone into keeping the land alive for generations. Children played freely in the open spaces, families greeted him with smiles, and the community began to settle under a new light of honesty and law. Finally, one quiet evening, Amir sat beneath the oak tree, the same one where he had dreamed as a child. He looked at the horizon, feeling peace in his heart. He had returned for his inheritance, but more importantly, he had returned for justice, fairness, and the memory of his father. For the first time in years, Amir felt a sense of completion. The land had been reclaimed, the truth had been spoken, and the people were safe. The cabins no longer represented deceit, they represented a future built on honesty. And Amir smiled, knowing he had done what was right. The fight had ended, but the memory of it would live on, a reminder that courage, patience, and truth always find their way home.